Last night, Manchester United got the Premier League season underway with a pretty good Old Trafford atmosphere, a decent performance on the pitch, no injuries, a debut goal for our new striker, and of course, 3 important points. All in all, a pretty good night. Let's take a look at how they done it. So we're going to start this video by looking at Manchester United on the ball, because this was the main theme when the game was settled, although the game wasn't always settled, as we'll discuss later. But when it was settled, United were the team on the ball looking to take control, move the ball forward and try to create chances. And of course that all starts at the back with your goalkeeper and your 2 centre-backs, who would split either side of Onana in goal. We could also see Dalot inverting into midfield to help out as well. Although to be honest, we don't really need to focus and spend too much time here because Fulham did not press with a great intensity. Anytime they did press with intensity, they left themselves one player short, so United could find the spare man and move the ball forward. United all in all looked pretty comfortable in the first phase. It was fairly easy, not because we'd done anything special, but mainly because Fulham didn't really press too much. So for United, instead of focusing on the first phase, it was all about the second phase. Moving the ball forward and looking to break this Fulham team down, get into the final third and create chances, where I largely felt United were actually pretty effective at times. Now, at times this would be using a 2-4 shape, so we've got the 2 centre-backs and then the 2 midfielders in front with the 2 full-backs either side, looking a little bit like this. However, that was not the most common shape from United in this game. Instead, we changed to more of a back 3 on the ball. Now, the way that United done this changed throughout the game. At times we would see Casemiro dropping between the 2 centre-backs, Kobbie Mainoo would drop into a solo pivot and the 2 full-backs are going to play higher. There were situations where Kobbie Mainoo would be given the licence to move further forward, which we like to see from him. Casemiro would move into midfield, Maguire would be a central centre-back, and Mazraoui would play on the right-hand side of the back 3. But either way, United spent a lot of this game moving to a back 3, and then in front of that back 3, we've got a couple of different shapes. At times it is going to look a bit like a box shape, perhaps with Rashford and Mount moving inside like this, kind of into that box shape in midfield, or it could also rotate to more of a diamond shape as well. In terms of the personnel, how it lined up, Kobbie Mainoo was very much given this kind of connector role down the left hand side. Rashford and Dalot are going to rotate on the left as well. And then we've got Bruno, Mount, Ahmad sort of rotating on the right hand side. But the key here for United was getting into this shape and overloading the middle of the pitch. We can see United simply have too many players in the middle of the pitch for Fulham to deal with. And when you play with this sort of 3 diamond 3 shape at times, it gives you a lot of passing triangles on the ball, a lot of options. Now the important thing for United, should we continue with this, is going to be making sure that players are close enough to the ball. You know, we don't want someone like Casemiro getting isolated, but in general, United looked pretty good in this shape, and we had an ability to move the ball forward and cause problems. Now the main way that we looked to do that was by overloading the middle of the pitch, as we've just seen. We're going to drag Fulham really narrow, but we're actually going to play with quite a bit of width in this particular phase. In the second phase of the pitch, we brought Fulham narrow, but ourselves played with width. Normally Ahmad on the right hand side was the one doing this job, and then on the left it was Dalot or Rashford. More often I would say it was Dalot, but again they certainly rotated. Now what this done was it gave United really easy access out wide. The back 3 shape plus the width gives us easy ball progression in these wider areas, because someone like Mason Mount can drift into this little pocket of space here. You're going to have Kobbie Mainoo doing something similar on the other side, and also Rashford or Dalot as well. Let's say on this occasion it's Dalot. Now when you do this, the opposition obviously need to cut off the channels of space, these kind of passing lines through the midfield. So for them to do that, they move a little more narrow, a little more central. But what this is obviously going to do, you can all see it, is it opens up really easy passing angles from Mazraoui to Ahmad. Of course, Maguire could play these passes as well, but also Lisandro Martinez to Rashford or Dalot on the left-hand side. United had really easy access to the wide areas. Ball progression in the middle was a little bit more tricky at times in this phase, but out wide we could do it quite easily. From here, what is then going to happen is rotations in the final third in these wider positions. We spoke about it in pre-season. Wide rotations are key for this United team. So as Rashford receives, perhaps Dalot is going to run in behind. Bruno Fernandes could drop into the space. Of course, we sort of played with 2 false 9s in this game, so we could overload these areas of the pitch. And this is where United looked pretty dangerous, moving the ball forward. And we got into the final third fairly well. Now, one thing we should make clear is that it wasn't perfect from United on the ball. There was certainly some rust in the performance. You know, Lisandro Martinez had a couple of questionable moments. Kobbie Mainoo kind of lacked consistency with his technical ability. Also Bruno Fernandes as well. But these players haven't played much football in the last month. So we've got to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think it will change as the season goes on. I think these players will become, more technical, if you like. They will improve their performance on the ball. This game certainly had a little bit of rust to it, which did cause problems that we'll discuss shortly. One player, though, who I do quickly want to kind of single out was Mazraoui. There was no rust there. His performance on the ball was so good, and it's the fact that he can go both ways. The angles that he opened up into the middle of the pitch, because he could use his left foot, were really important for United. And like I said, in general, we did move the ball towards the final third pretty nicely. So of course, having progressed the ball into the final third, the question is now, can you actually break them down? Can you do that last little bit? Can you find an overload or a spare man or a killer pass in the final third? And how do you go about doing it? Well, the approach from United in these areas is different to what we see earlier in the play, if you like. In the second phase, there was a lot of width. As we move to the final third, we see minimum width coming into play. The two wingers, Ahmad and Rashford, both moving inside. Now, again, we should clarify, that doesn't mean they always play inside. They will have moments where they go to a touchline, try and beat a player. Of course they will. But generally speaking, United tried to use minimum width. And the reason they done that was because it allowed us to get lots of players really close to each other. And there were a couple of really nice passing moves where United had 4, 5, 6 players really close to each other, close proximity, and it allows us to move the ball into the final third actually really effectively and create some really good chances. And United should have scored 2, 3 goals in this game. Bruno Fernandes could have had a couple. Of course, Garnacho should have scored one as well. Slightly different situation. But in general, I felt a lot of what United done on the ball tactically was really good. Structurally, it was good. I think Ten Hag got it right. Individual kind of rust is still there. A lack of sharpness is still there. And that was probably United's biggest problem. Because one, it makes it more difficult to create chances when you're a bit loose with your first touch or your pass. But also, it does make you a little bit vulnerable defensively. And United did have that problem. When we were loose on the ball, particularly with so many players committed high, you can see United are really attacking here. When we are loose on the ball, we open ourselves up to a world of danger, to be honest. Because playing against a sort of 4-4-2 defensive shape, whilst using the 3-1 yourself, can really open you up. Because you've got these channels that you can go into. But you've got players that can instantly pounce around Casemiro. Now, Casemiro actually had a pretty good game, if you ask me. A couple of turning issues and a couple of dueling issues where he kind of goes aggressive when he shouldn't. But in general, he had a pretty good game. However, you're always going to struggle when you are 2v1 initially in the transition. I think at times our centre-backs could have been more aggressive to help him, to back him up in these positions in the middle of the pitch, but it didn't happen. Perhaps because of the threat out wide. Fulham did get into positions where they really could have hurt United. People will say, we kept a clean sheet, they didn't have much XG, things like that. They had opportunities. Opportunities are where we're talking about a team getting into a good position, but perhaps not quite getting the shot off. There were several situations of that, like we've just seen, so that would be an issue for United. Now, again, I would expect that naturally to improve as the season goes on, particularly in the first month of the season, because players will become sharper, which means on the ball we should be a little bit better. However, structurally, there is still a slight concern there. When we do lose the ball, this 3-1 shape does leave us quite vulnerable. Now, Mason Mount deserves credit. He's done a lot of really good defensive work. We know that Bruno Fernandes is always going to help us in these situations. I felt that Kobe was actually pretty good on the second ball as well. But there is still a concern there that we can be opened up on the transition. But how about the pressing? That's a big talking point with this United team. It has been for a couple of seasons. So let's take a look at that. So the high press, the pressing situations from Manchester United were almost exactly as I predicted the other day. Inconsistent. Moments where it works really well and United are able to lock Fulham to one side of the pitch, win the ball back and look threatening in the final third. We saw situations like that where United squeezed high, forced Fulham into errors in deep areas. Now, when United looked good, that was partly because of a good structure, United doing well. We should also remember that Fulham are quite poor at playing out from the back. Leno in goal in particular really struggles with that. There's a reason Arsenal sold him the other year. So I wouldn't get overly excited about our press, but there is just one thing I want to talk about. When we did lock it on quite nicely, Harry Maguire was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Now, what I'm talking about here is when we go for a more of a man-to-man approach. So let's say Leno has gone to Bassi like this. Mount is going to lock onto here. Bruno Fernandes is going to come over, and so is Rashford. Now, at times, Dalot would connect. This was where it was inconsistent, and I will have an issue with that in a second. But let's say on this occasion, we have gone aggressive, we have gone man-to-man. And, we did see Lisandro Martinez defending these wide areas. This forces Fulham to play long. This is what United should be looking to do with the press. Force Fulham to play long so we can win the ball back. And we've done that at times. And when we done that, Harry Maguire was so good in the air. Aerially so good. Playing as this central centre-back in this system, I think Maguire had an absolutely phenomenal game. Another player who hasn't had much pre-season, who I don't actually think is fully fit. Obviously, we saw him come off late on as well. Absolutely phenomenal. So good in the air in this game, backing up this United press. And this is when we looked good, when defensively we were good. Because if you defend well, you can attack better. Simply because if you defend well, you win the ball higher, you get more of the ball, which, you know, more volume, more time on the ball, gives you more chance of creating chances in the final third. So United did look good when we done that. However, that was a little bit inconsistent. Because we also saw plenty of situations where the centre-backs wouldn't always join the press, particularly if our midfield got pulled open. Let's say Smith Rowe dragged Casemiro with a bit of decoy movement, the striker's going to move in. United needed to help Casemiro more here. You know, Lisandro Martinez and Maguire can be aggressive, but we perhaps didn't see it enough. But actually the bigger issue for me is higher up the pitch, kind of leaving ourselves in that -1 situation. You know, we want to be equal with them when we're pressing. We weren't. And that was an issue because of the positioning of the United players. And this is a tactical thing, we've seen it before. That situation where Rashford is going to have that job where he's marking two players. He's marking Diop, but he's also marking the fullback as well. Rashford had that problem. Now that's not a Rashford issue, that is a team structural tactical issue. Now for large parts, United got away with it, to be honest, because Leno, again, just isn't very good on the ball. He's not a comfortable ball player. He doesn't want to be kind of clipping it out to the fullback and things like that. But in the moments where Fulham were brave, they could move the ball forward, and this is where we then had problems, because Rashford gets drawn in, the ball can go wide, perhaps that might be direct, or off a pop pass in midfield, but the ball can go wide. This draws Kobbie Mainoo out of position, and this is when the midfield really opens up. And like I said, our centre-backs weren't that aggressive in these situations. There was a hesitance engaging in these areas. And when Fulham have good players, like Pereira, but also like Smith Rowe down this side of the pitch who can carry the ball forward, again it does lead to problems for United. So I would say defensively, it looks improved from last season. No doubt about that. There is an improvement. Particularly as we drop deeper, we get ourselves nice and close to each other, we're compact, we're difficult to break down. The press at times is really nice, really effective. We go man for man, and we force them long, and we win the ball, we win the second ball. Happy days. We're back in controlled possession. But it's an inconsistency, a real inconsistency, and it is a problem that United need to solve. Hopefully, naturally, you know, building fitness will help that, but I do have a slight tactical concern there. And I hate to leave the video on a negative, but that is where we are leaving it. All in all, though, it was pretty good from United. Like I said, on the ball, I think as the players kind of settled a little bit, it looked really impressive. Second half, we saw a physical decline, which then leads to a technical decline on the ball and a mental decline. You know, you start making poor decisions. That's when the game opens up a little bit. Ultimately, once the game was open, United had more quality. Xerxes, of course, involved in that goal. A brilliant goal for him. So, the second half, I don't think that we learned too much. I think the first half was more interesting. The second half, we saw that decline from both teams. Physically, technically, you know, in terms of decisions they're making as well. It opened the game up. United had the superior quality. Got the 1-0 win and 3 points. It was a good night for United. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to improve. But it was also really positive in spells as well. We attacked well. XG-wise, we kind of destroyed them. We should have scored 2 or 3. So I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy for a first night. So, yeah, that's that for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.